I was 10 years old when this account happened, in the fall of 5th grade. My mother, sister, and I were visiting family in Kansas while on break from school. My family is from Jeonju, South Korea, but my father is African American, so we grew up with both cultures. We speak English fluently, so it wasn't hard traveling and interacting with others. My aunt is a devoted Christian and really loved bringing us to church with her and a friendly friend, Sandra. Now, I'm not against going to church, but I don't believe in a set God. I do, however, believe in a higher power, and spent a good portion of my time at a Buddhist temple, where my grandfather is one of the head monks and tomb keeper. So despite being more spiritually inclined, I would get up early and put on my Sunday best, and would stumble out the door jet-lagged to make it to service on time. The services always started normally. Greet thy neighbors, welcome the guests, singing, and eventually the prayer would come out and read through scripture. There were times prayers for those in the community would happen, or people coming forward to be saved in the form of baptism. My family normally sat in what my aunt called the best pew in the house, but we didn't sit in that pew alone. There was a man that sat between our family and another family of 3. The man sitting on the other side of my mother and next to Mr. Hopper was considered an outstanding member of the community. He was active in the church, and his kids even used to babysit around the community. All in all, he seemed just like the typical American family man. He was odd though. Something about his mannerisms threw my family for a loop. This man used to lean over toward my mother, to the point his head was almost on her shoulder, and he would take a deep inhale. My mother would lean away towards me, almost crushing me, and promptly would ask the man, "Can I help you with something?" He smiled and just laughed a bit and shook his head no, and muttered an apology for making us uncomfortable. He stated, "You just smell familiar." It makes me remember something, triggers a deep memory in me. My mom would just laugh it off rather uncomfortably and stated it's Sea Island Cotton from Bath & Body Works. This has been my mom's favorite scent ever since I can remember. It's her signature. If you've ever smelled it, you would know just how fresh and clean the perfume is. So maybe he was just drawn in subconsciously, like a moth to a flame. But as time progressed and service after service passed, he continued his sniffing ministrations. My mom eventually had enough. This man was creepy and couldn't take the hint to back off. We jumped ship and moved pews the next service to an area more towards the back. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. The man must have thought man overboard, because he jumped ship as well and maneuvered through the worshipers to sit right next to us. The cycle continued up until we boarded our plane to go home. However, the story doesn't end here. Remember I mentioned the family friend Sandra? Well, Sandra was a dental hygienist in Kansas, and she had a patient who was found murdered in her own home. I will not be disclosing her name out of respect for her and her family. This woman, may she rest in peace, was found bound with rope and a plastic bag over her head. It was apparent she had been brutally tortured before she passed. Not long after that, another body was discovered, again in their own home. Mocking letters started being sent into the local police station. If you haven't figured it out yet, this was the work of the serial killer, BTK, which stands for Bind, Torture, Kill. He was back after years of silence. Initially, police thought maybe it was a copycat killer, since BTK had been quiet for so long. The killings continued for a bit longer, and for what I remember, my aunt and uncle were on edge. The whole community was. BTK was eventually caught, and I can't tell you all the details regarding that since I was back home in Korea. But I can tell you we received a terrifying phone call not long after. My aunt and Sandra called to inform us it was over, that BTK was caught. We should have slept easy knowing our friends and family were safe. They were no longer prey. BTK wasn't just a serial killer. He was the man from the Pews, the one that sniffed my mother consistently. He was Dennis Rader, The thing that scares me most, my mom could have been on his list. She could have been a victim, all because we sat in the pews and greeted our neighbor with brotherly love. I live in a city with a public transportation system. They have been extremely short-staffed, and more often than not, you have to call to make sure your bus is even coming. On weekdays, during business hours, the public transit operator will order you a lift to get you to work if your bus isn't showing up. Tuesday, I'm at the bus stop after checking multiple times if my bus is coming, only to find out that it wasn't. They ordered me a lift, and this nice older gentleman was my driver. We had a casual conversation, and he started to ask personal questions. I'm a bartender, and I'm super friendly already, so I didn't think his questions were ill-intentioned. I told him I'm not married and that I'm pretty much a loner. I basically go to work and go home and spend time with family. He then says, "I'd marry you in a heartbeat." Again, I'm just thinking he's being funny or nice. I asked him to drop me at the downtown grocery so I could pick up a few things I needed for work. When we stopped, he said he was just joking and that he's married and has a son my age. Asked if I was interested in maybe meeting him. Since I have a terrible track record, I figured it wouldn't hurt meeting someone out of my circle, so I gave the man my number and we parted ways. The next morning, he texted me and asked if I needed a ride to work. I told him he didn't have to do that and that I was sure my bus was running. He said that it would be his pleasure and that he'd pick me up at my house at 3 p.m. Then about an hour later, he asked if I wanted to have lunch with him before work. I told him I was busy and that I couldn't do that. He said, "Okay, see you at 3. He shows up at 3 and lets me know he's outside. While I'm finishing getting things together, I opened the door and he started to walk up my stairs to my house. I told him I was ready and we could head downtown. When I get in the back seat, he turns around and says he has a confession. He told me from the time I took off my mask, his heart danced like a butterfly. He says that he hasn't been able to stop thinking about me since the day before, and that he'd love to spend time with me, and that he'd pay me for that time if I spent the day with him. That's when I started to feel super uncomfortable. The whole ride was making me cringe. But I know when you're in a situation like that with a predator, playing nice is safer than freaking out. He continued on the entire ride how he loved me at first sight and wanted to make me his Lebanese queen. As we got closer to downtown, I started to feel relief. He dropped me off at my hotel and said, "See you tomorrow." That evening at work, I checked my phone after a busy happy hour and he's texted me a couple times. He sent a picture of the hotel and said he'd wait for me to get off to give me a ride home. I told him I already had a ride, but thank you anyways. Thursday morning, I'm out running errands with my mom and sister. He texts me and asks how early he can pick me up because he can't stop thinking about me. I asked him to please stop and that I was with family. He continues to text me all day and evening, begging to see me, telling me his heart is aching to see his Lebanese queen. I just kept saying, "Please stop." Friday morning, the shit hit the fan. He tells me he loves me no matter what. He said, "I told my wife about you and that I'm in love with you and I want a divorce." I told him to please don't do that and that it wasn't right to treat his wife that way. He said it wasn't my fault, that they were drifting apart anyways. Then he said, "I'm picking you up for dinner at 5:30 and I'm not taking no for an answer." About 5:25, my video doorbell rings and he's standing on my porch for at least 15 minutes. I told him I wasn't home and that he should leave. He continues to text me and beg to come pick me up from my parents. I was home the whole time, but was too scared to let him know that. I eventually called the non-emergency police station, but he had already left by the time I got through. I filed a general report, but technically they can't do anything unless he's standing on my porch threatening me. They advised me to report through Lyft, so I did. Haven't heard anything since, but that shit was just creepy as fuck. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more or simply like to support my channel, Please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps out. Until next time.